Chairman Stewart, Chairman Loomis, and ranking members Swalwell and Bonamici, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Kurt Waltzer. I'm the Managing Director of the Clean Air Task Force, an environmental nonprofit dedicated to catalyzing the development and global deployment of low-carbon energy technologies. First, let me explain why we believe CCS is needed. The world's power sector annual emissions are expected to double from 12 to 24 gigatons by mid-century. By 2015, China will have added 900 gigawatts of coal plants on top of our roughly 300 gigawatts of coal plants in the U.S. India and other developing countries are following suit. Without significant CCS deployment, we simply will not be able to achieve the deep reductions in CO2 emissions that are necessary to reduce the risk of catastrophic climate change. Returning to the question in front of the committee, CCS is technically feasible in the context of this rule because the rule requires partial, not full CCS, and because the rule allows a plant up to 8 years to meet this standard. The 40% capture level is well within the experience of the technology. Moreover, if a plant intends to capture CO2 on the day it opens and can't because of unforeseen issues with, for example, completion of a CO2 pipeline, the 8-year compliance flexibility provision allows the plant to meet the standard over a longer time frame. The partial capture and sequestration requirement and flexibility provisions, along with the ability to store CO2 in conjunction with enhanced oil recovery, or EOR, helps ensure the rule can be met at reasonable cost, even before any federal subsidies are considered. CATF undertook an analysis of the initial NSPS rule first proposed on April of 2012. As we can see by Figure 1 on page 8 of my testimony, the cost of electricity at a new coal plant that meets the partial CCS standard with EOR and takes advantage of the regulatory flexibility provision is only 13% higher than that of a new coal plant without CCS. CCS has been adequately demonstrated over its 40-year history in the U.S. Since the 1970s and 80s, large industrial plants have captured and stored large amounts of CO2 on a per-plant basis, up to 7 million tons per year. This experience is migrating to power plants. Nearly all new coal plants plan to have some level of CCS installed when they open. These include projects like the 582-megawatt Kemper plant in Mississippi, the Texas Clean Energy Project, and the SaskPower's coal retrofit project in Canada, known as Boundary Dam. Each of the components of CCS have had a long history of use in the U.S. and around the world. Over 850 megatons of CO2 have been stored underground in Texas for EOR operations over the last 30 years. There are currently 4,000 miles of CO2 pipeline connecting CO2 with enhanced oil recovery projects. Pre-combustion capture technology has been commercially available since the 1950s and 60s with over 200 plant applications across the world, and post-combustion capture has been successfully applied to natural gas and coal plants with commercial guarantees offered from several vendors. Does CATF also support incentives for CCS? Absolutely. Many technologies such as SO2 scrubbers that have been deployed based on emission limits have continued to receive subsidies in order to make the technology more efficient and less costly. The EPA has long recognized that such subsidies are appropriately considered in evaluating the real cost of a standard. CATF is a member of the National EOR Initiative, an unusual coalition of advocacy groups, industry, and labor organizations that are coming together in support of self-financing production tax credits for CO2 EOR sourced by power plants and industrial sources. I should note that in addition to EOR's value in reducing costs, it also provides significant potential scale. The National Energy Technology Laboratory estimates the technical potential to sequester CO2 through EOR in the U.S. is as high as 80 million barrels or 4 million barrels a day and require 20 gigatons of CO2. That represents about half of the total U.S. power sector emissions for the next 30 years. We believe that EPA's rules on sound legal and technical footing. It is not the end of coal. Instead, it is the beginning of CCS worldwide. I appreciate the opportunity to testify this morning and look forward to answering your questions.